Did you know that BDSM and kink are healthy outlets for aggression, imagination, and attention? Hi, and welcome to the Partition, home of kinky wellness. My name is Dana Slosser, and I'm a sexual wellness coach that dives deep into all things kinky. I'm here to show how BDSM and kink deserves a rightful spot within the sexual wellness conversation. So, let's talk about it. Hello, and welcome back to the Partition podcast. Today, we are once again joined by the lovely Katrina Fairhurst, and we'll be going into sexual writing a bit deeper and talking about our perspectives. I do want to say in this episode, it does come with a trigger warning, as we will be talking about CNC. For those who don't know what CNC stands for, it stands for Consensual Non-Consensual, and we will include our opinions on writing about it. So welcome back, Katrina.
Hi, well, thank you for having me.
Yay. So today I'm excited about this topic as it's both of our current career styles right now.
It is the bread and butter of what we do, I would say, yes.
So what I want to start with is really like what got you into your sexual writing when you first got into this? So I know you're in products.
So for me, because I do the product descriptions, but also the main bit of kind of sex writing that I do is I write like different articles about topics within sex and sexual wellness. So it's anything from like my most recent one that I wrote today was about vaginismus. And actually like a personal essay about that, alongside things like product reviews and like sex toy reviews, and also talking about sex education. So I think like for me, the main place that it came from was me and my friends love to talk about sex and like sex education and our need for like an adult form of sex education in like the wider world. It's been a conversation that we've all had we've been all having for years, and about like, you know, a range of topics, everything from like porn to masturbation to like even just understanding how your vulva works. So when I started looking at going freelance, the main thing that I looked at doing was obviously like writing, because that's something I've always been very good at. And yeah, it just kind of like I ended up getting in contact with Love Not War, which is the main client that I have with this. And they said they needed a blog for like website optimization. So that's kind of where it is. And from there, it's taken off. So I've like, you know, I get to write about things that I'm really passionate about, not just sex education, but also things like pole dancing, boudoir shots, you know, ways to be sexually confident. And just like all of these topics that I think we all need to be discussing, but are not really being talked about at the current moment. So it's been really nice to be able to talk about things that I rant about to my friends over 2 glasses of wine, to be honest. So
yeah, no, that's good. And would you say that this has helped you across like different avenues of your life, or personally and professionally?
I think both personally and professionally, because professionally, like, one, I get to be able to kind of say to people like I'm knowledgeable on these topics. I'm not just writing from my own perspective, like I'm going and researching them. So it's been a really amazing way of like kind of educating myself alongside educating others. But then I think also from my own personal life, it's been a really amazing thing of being able to kind of therapize or almost like I'm talking about topics that have been in my head for years. Like, so my most recent one, the vaginismus one, because it was Vaginismus Awareness Day yesterday in the UK. It was this amazing opportunity to actually kind of put pen and paper and talk about my experience, like where I got it from, how I'm dealing with it, how I'm learning to understand pleasure. And it's kind of like, that was kind of almost therapeutic, but then also talking about things like kink and BDSM and how to kind of become sexually confident and how to enjoy different things. One, it's been this amazing thing of like opening up my world and expanding my horizons for things that I might want to try, things that I might be interested in. But it's also been a really good way of kind of talking about things that I am already interested in and I do want to try and I am looking to try. and kind of just putting it out to everybody else. So I think it's made me a lot more confident in being able to talk about like my wants, my likes, my desires, because I'm getting paid to do that anyway.
Which is even better.
It's even better. Like, you know, get paid to do what you love is what I think.
Like, you have found that it's been helpful for you. And do you think that it would be helpful for others to maybe write about even their sex or sexual experiences?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. Like, so obviously I write more from kind of a, like, not professional, but more of a kind of article base. So it's not just like, you know, it's not just me necessarily talking about this is like story. It's not me writing stories at the moment and stuff like that. But I think it's a really good way of, one, kind of allowing yourself to put pen and paper and almost admit things that you want to do, or talk about things that you have. And then if you go for a more like, you know, the storytelling aspect of it, you can either like relive like your favorite memories, or it's an amazing way of like kind of thinking through what your big fantasies are and kind of helping you create things for yourself to help you get off. So I think it's an amazing way of like empowering yourself, and also using your imagination, which I know is a big part of like AIA, as you say. So absolutely. Yeah, I think it's definitely something everybody should try, whether you write it like I do for a blog and do it like where it's actually like where it's out there in the world, or if you just write it for yourself.
Well, I agree. Like, yeah. I actually find it strange when people don't sext a little bit, because that's such a, at least with me, like sexting, that is how I judge people if they're going to be good in bed. It's definitely a big I think it's a component. I actually, like, it's funny in the sense of like, especially in the dom dad, when I would be looking for a dom situation, that's a test that I'm going to say like, hey, like, here's like, I would ask or try to say like, build me a scenario with 1, 2, 3 and write me a paragraph. What would that look like to you? And if it's just very simple, then it's like, okay, pass. But it's very detailed, then I'll continue that conversation as like an interview process almost.
It's almost like, what is it, when I have to do creative writing tasks for my copywriting? Excuse me, can you do what you're saying you're going to do?
Yeah. Like, it's another way of being like, okay, can you put your money where your mouth is?
Which, no, I think is very fair. So like, do you have like a scale of like what you consider? Do they get ranked? Do they get like points? I need to know this now.
You know what? There are so many people that don't make it through. It used to be where I would ask my questions first and then give out the scenario question of the text, but then I switched it, and that ended up being the first thing that I sent out, because I realized that they could answer all those basic questions super simple, but if they couldn't text me or like in the detail that I find is on my level, then there's no point. I'm like, okay, they're not that imaginative, they're not that creative. It's really not that hard. Like, when people are like, oh, sexting is so hard, I don't believe it. I actually don't. I'm like, okay, then you're just actively not trying to use your imagination at this point.
Yeah, I used to love sex. I used to do it for my friends. Like,
same. Like, I'd have the phone.
Yeah.
It would be like me, circle. And it got to the point where it's like, I would be like, can I just take your phone and just do this? Like, I want to do this. And I think that's why I got Tinder actually so much. Like, I used to literally just sext people, and then once the conversation was done, unmatch, as if nothing happened. Yeah, like, just so fast. Like, I am so bad.
I love it.
Oh, that's what I used to do.
You were creating your own fan fiction, basically.
Yeah.
You were like, end of that story. Don't need to leave a like.
Yeah, I guess that sounds bad, but I used to love it. It's so funny.
I'm like, look, some people go on there just to like waste time and to ghost. You went on there to get an imagination fix, and you got what you needed. But alongside like sexting, so like, how did you get into sexual writing then?
Yeah, it really did start with my friends in high school, and it stayed tame, I would say, around that time. The detail part didn't come into play until I got older, and it kind of came in the same way as that when I started reading a little bit more. And now, like, the last 3, 4, like, I would say the last 3 years, I read a lot now. Like, I actively try to read every day, and which is something I didn't do, but that made my writing 10 times better. And it's funny because you hear that advice, read, you'll write better. And it's true, but no one ever does it. And now I'm like, fuck, I should have done it earlier. But yeah, and then my sexting really got into like the R-rated, like more graphic, but graphic, I don't want to use that word graphic. It's more detailed is what I like to say. Like it's a more detailed way of putting it. But yeah, until I got into DOMs and things like that, because they were already so creative. And once they showed the gateway of like this, we can make a more creative scene here, then yeah, and then it kind of grew from there. But sorry.
I was gonna say, because you write stories and like you do like the story side of things a lot more, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I would like to say that there's stories, like a lot of the sexting that I do doesn't actually, it starts well before, like there's like a whole chapter before anything happens of the lead up, the very, like even the doorway, like the person walks into the doorway, hand on the, or no, like comes into the door frame, puts their hand against the door frame. Like it takes like 5 pages before they even enter the room. Like it's just so funny. So
if it's really detailed and it's done right, like it's hot.
Yeah, well, but I've also noticed that with sex writing, it's kind of like BDSM where people might think, even if the more like for instance, CNC, like people will be like, oh yeah, I want to read a story like that. So I'll go and I'll make one. And then it will turn them completely off. Like, and that's how I feel about BDSM. Like a lot more people, they need to think twice before they say it because words can still affect you the same way a video can.
Yes.
But for instance, I love it. Like, I think it's great, but I have been in an instance where I did do that for someone, they asked for it. And then they were like, oh no, I actually don't like this at all. And I was like, that's okay. But I'm sorry. Like you asked, like, what do you want? And he's like, no, it's okay. It's mine. But now I just know for a fact, this isn't my thing. And I'm like, cool.
But then I think like, that's the enjoyment, I think, of being able to, like, for me, reading it. I love reading like, because it's called the minute it's put on into like a book, it's called erotica, when actually it is just porn. But also things like through fan fiction and like online stories, we've all read them and stuff like that. And I think sometimes you need that safety of being able to read something. Well, let's be honest, like if you're reading something, you know, in your head, it's not like watching, I feel like you said, it's safer than watching porn because, you know, if you do enjoy CNC or you do want to see if that is something you enjoy or anything like maybe not CNC, but even anything like even like hardcore BDSM, like rougher stuff, if it's something you yourself are not necessarily sure about, it can almost feel like you're watching some, like the way you're watching it, if you're watching it on porn, because it's more two people and you're physically seeing two people act out this fantasy, it can almost be a little bit more scary. It can almost feel like you're taking advantage, even though it's between two consensual people, because you're not necessarily sure of it. But if you're reading it, it's you that you tend to put in that fantasy. You can do the imagination. You kind of like, it's like basically putting your hands in the wall, like, you know, testing out if something's a little bit too hot for you. Like you said, he asked you to write it, or your partner asked you to write it, they didn't enjoy it, but they can walk away from it without worrying that somebody else has been hurt. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I think also with a book, I feel like it's easier to close it or like just stop reading it. Like you can tell, like in porn, it's very fast and it's very like as soon as you see it, it's there, it's burned inside those eyelids. Like
whereas like the minute you're like if you're reading something, like you said, the minute you start to feel, oh, actually this isn't what I like, or actually, oh, this isn't what I enjoy, you can stop it. Like, you know. And also I find it's a really odd one, but like, you know, especially like as somebody who does read a lot of fan fiction, the warnings you get, people give them a lot better than they do like in porn, because you see them on the actual page before you see the tags, you see what they say before you actually click onto that story. But if you're just going off of the title of a porn name that you found on a random site, you don't necessarily know what you're gonna get until you're
and that's the thing, half the time, like you click on a video and it's already starting with a bang. Like there's no lead up, there's no story, like unless you pay for it, but most of the time it's just clips of something. But fan fiction, so what, like, which one is your favorite? Do you have a favorite fan fiction?
Oh my God, it depends. So I have like, it's a really weird one. It completely depends on the time of the month for me, what I enjoy. Because I have like, you know, if I want something a little bit nasty, a little bit hardcore, I have a thing for like tentacle sex, which is really weird as a lesbian, I'm aware. But
that's like, awesome.
That kind of like hardcore, this non-gendered entity making you take it. I'm like, yeah, that does it for me. And then obviously when I'm out of my period, I'm like, I don't have a breeding kink, it turns out.
Okay, so it's funny you say tentacles, because my friends and I were just talking about like, what animal would you want to fuck? And I said an octopus, because they have 8, like I could be held and all sorts, like they have 8 arms. Like I'm completely covered. Like that's great for me. So why would you pick a 2-armed animal?
No, and I understand that. And then on the other side of it, like I like, it's like, you know, there's no specific parents that I'm obsessed with. There's no specific like fandom that I'm obsessed with. Like I'll read anything if it's good, but there are some where I'm just like, oh, I don't like that. Like I can hand on my heart say I'm not interested in water sports or anything like that, because I have accidentally read one too many fic on it and gone, nah, that's not for me. That was completely my own fault. I didn't read the tags. But there are different, like, so I would say like depend, like I love reading ones about like cunnilingus because I love oral. It's a real, and like, you know, I get to imagine 2 hot people going at it, or like imagining myself with 2 hot people going at it, because I deserve all of that.
So do you write fan fiction yourself, like erotic fan fiction, or?
So I haven't in ages, but when I was in high school, I did. I wrote one, hand wrote it in a notebook because I'm old school, and it accidentally got sent around the class, and I ended up getting detention for it. But can I just say, turns out I opened a lot of girls' eyes to how lesbians have sex, and also how you can like have good sex that doesn't just involve a penis, because I find like so many people assume that's the only form of sex, and I'm like, no. Here, let me write it for you. Well, let me draw you a picture of it. But what about yourself?
Well, it's true, actually. Like I find that it can be used, sex writing, and be like, oh, like maybe to have sex in the way that like, oh, you can have different positions or like different themed things. Like it's surprising how much little effort you need to put into a room setting to change the whole vibe. Like candles in a blanket, or just get off the bed, like anywhere else other than your bedroom, really. Can bring creativity.
No, and I like, you know, I really enjoy, I like the creativity that comes with reading it as well. And I find like, especially, so I didn't like, obviously I came out quite young, but I just found like with porn, it didn't really do it for me, because it's always really, really feminine women. And like my fantasy is, and like, you know, trigger warning for that one, but like, I really like the idea of like I want a butch girlfriend. Like I've got it in my head, they're gonna look like that. But like, I really am attracted to like butch lesbians, more masculine vibes, masculine energy. And like, it's really ironic that I've got vagissimus, because my biggest fantasy is to get kind of done with a fucking strap on. That's why I'm doing my dilators, because Mama's gonna get her fantasy.
Yes, she is.
Like, yes, I know it will, and they're gonna have a motorbike. Like that's my thing. But like when I was younger, like looking for like the types of stuff that I could read about it, erotica and fan fiction were like the biggest places that I could go to find like how lesbians have sex, how like, you know, and seeing like, you know, there's a lot out there where it is butch femme dynamics, and it was people writing about stuff that I was that turns me on. And it's like, yeah, and and then I can also imagine the partner that I want. Like I find when you watch it with porn, their version of butch isn't necessarily butch. It's just, one of them wears a skirt and the other one's wearing like a tank top, and you're like,
Yeah.
that's not butch for me.
And also,
Like,
like, sorry, words
oh,
sometimes just turn me on more than seeing it.
yeah,
Like, I actually genuinely like taking the time and rereading it, or
oh
like
god, yeah.
sinking into that page almost.
Yeah, and like especially when you get like that right kind of thing where it's well written. I think we've all had like experiences where you read it and like you do sit there and you just go, what the fuck did I just read?
Honestly, like, no, my ex,
Yeah,
sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, badly written sex or like bad sex writing is one of the most hilarious but mind baffling things to me, because I don't understand how the anatomy necessarily works.
That's funny.
You know what you're like, I can clearly tell somebody who's never seen a naked body before.
Or like, yeah, but even that, it's like, this is how you describe the naked body. Like, this is how you're going to describe it. Like, that's kind of what it is. Like, I know some people are just terrible writers, but that's a skill you should probably work on, because writing in general, whether it's sex writing or not, like, is just a skill that people should have.
Oh, I agree. Like there's that girl on TikTok, I always forget her name, but she has this series of like, it's called Men Describing Women. But even then, she's got somewhere it's women describe it. And like the way some people describe bodies, like specifically women's bodies, is hilarious. I'm like, I never knew there were so many adjectives that could go around with like having boobs, that it just cracks me up.
I'll have to check that out. That's funny.
Oh, I will find you some and send them because they kill me. It's like if I'm having a sad day, it's my favorite thing to read.
Well, like, speaking about people that surprise you, like I remember one time I had an ex and he surprised me. Like, his writing was phenomenal, but he went in like the fantasy base more. So like in this like fantasy, we had like this, I know this sounds cute, but we had this like whole Tink hook thing going on for like months and months and months. So that would happen to be like the floating theme that we would do. And he was the first guy that I think that ever really took sexting to a fantasy more based, because like males, I find they always sext in reality, like what they can see presently right now. But yeah. I don't know. I'm a girl who's obsessed with dressing up. Like Halloween is just not good enough for me one day of the year. Like it has to, like I want to dress up all the time. So when I read that, I was like, wow, this is so cute. I love like fairy stuff like that, cute, mystical forest. Like that's kind of a thing I like to do too.
Oh, I understand. And like, I do like the idea of having sex in the woods. So yeah.
Yeah. Like, throw a little like glow on there. That's my cup of tea.
Put me in a dress, I'm yours.
Yeah, but then on the flip side of that, then there's a darker story. But I really do believe that's because like my dad showed us a lot of horror films growing up. So Poltergeist was one of my first films that I ever watched. And that was kind of like the theme at my dad's house. Like he never really had age appropriate films, but he gave me a dark sense of humor. And I also found that growing up writing, well, I guess later in life, writing darker stories kind of offset the reality of my life, which was kind of like an outlet as well. So it gave balance. Like people really need to like get these things out of their head, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend that these fantasies or images or thoughts are not in my head. I think that's what it is.
No.
So I think some people do though, and it would be helpful for them to get it out on paper.
No, I think it is definitely that idea of like the darker stuff we've all got. I think everybody has got a darker fantasy that they're not necessarily they want to enact or like they want to go through with, but we've all got something that not necessarily is squeaky clean when it comes to getting you off. And I think being able to read it or write it is kind of that cathartic release of like, okay, this is something I enjoy reading, and like this is something that does get me off, and it is kind of, and it can be a helpful thing to do as well, like with the darker stuff. So, you know, things like that idea of like the victim, assailant, or bystander, depending on what form of CNC you read. For people who have gone through sexual trauma, that can be something that is quite cathartic, of like reading it and going through it and kind of dealing with it, but knowing the outcome and knowing they've consented to kind of going into it. It can be that amazing cathartic relationship of like release, and also like not understanding but enjoying and kind of changing the outcome for themselves of what actually did happen to them, which is something that apparently therapists said it's actually a really normal kink that people with who have been through sexual assault do actually
absolutely
go towards for that. Not that that is the only reason people should be writing it or reading it or consuming it. Like, you can, some people we just have things that get us off. Like,
well, I agree with that. I think that there's a lot of attention on like survivors only writing, like this is a survival like technique. Well, I feel when that is the general consensus of the attitude, I feel that we isolate a lot of people out of that category, and it makes them feel bad for wanting to write that or wanting to write CNC. And I think that that's actually such a destructive way of going around it. Like, you should just do this in therapy. Like, this is therapeutic writing. No, this is an enjoyable thing, is writing about these thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, like, and it is that idea of like, you know, just because you're writing about something doesn't mean you're necessarily going to go out and act it if that is something that you are writing. Like, it is just being like, this is just something that I'm imagining, or I enjoy writing about, and stuff like that. Like, you know, people who write tentacle porn, they're not going out there looking to, like you said, fuck an octopus. So we hope.
I think and people just jump the gun so quickly. And I do, even when people make negative comments towards even CNC writing or anything like that, in my head, I really do believe, I'm just like, okay, you've repressed whatever that is so far down, because it's a human thing. We cannot always just think of positive thoughts all day and tomorrow. Like, again, like, we get angry, and like, when people get like upset, you visualize these things, and it's like, okay, now get it out of your head onto something.
Exactly. And I think even from like a non-emotional perspective, like I said, sometimes I think people just get off on what they get off on. Like, you know, there are things that I read that I am like, not necessarily like, I've read stuff. There's actually like a tag for it when you read fan fiction, which is like dead dove do not eat, which basically just means it's really dark, it's really fucked up, and there is no happy ending at the end of this. You are going into it with the knowledge that I am going to read something fucked up, because I like to play a game where I read it and try and see how far I can go before I hit my nope button.
That's
not for me. And like, you know what? Some people are fantastic fucking writers, and I'm like, you're so creative and you're like so good at writing. It doesn't do it for me, but I want to know what happens in the story.
Yeah, like, it's still an adventure, like, in a way, like, it is an adventure.
It is. And sometimes you come out like you said, like, sometimes you can come out the other side of it and go, you know what? I read it. I tried to imagine myself in either of those positions, and no, it's not for me. And I think that is allowed. It's a healthy way of gaining knowledge onto your sexual fantasies, is the way I would see sex writing.
Yeah, exactly. And to add to that note, it should be something that, like, if you can't read it, or if you get uncomfortable reading it, then maybe don't try, like, don't try it, but in a way, it's like, okay, if you didn't like reading it and you can't visualize yourself doing it, there's probably a high chance that you're not going to enjoy it, and you're going to freeze, and you're going to hurt somebody, or something's going to come apart. And just be really honest with yourself. If you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. Don't read it. Don't look at it. Don't participate. It's okay, but don't also shit talk it either.
Yeah.
So,
like, it's when you see people who go in to read something, they didn't enjoy it, they didn't like reading it, they did, and so what they do is they turn around and they have a go at the author. Oh, that was awful, that was disgusting, how could you write something like that, you're a terrible person. No, this person was just writing a story. They're just
Yeah.
writing something because they wrote it for themselves. They wrote it to share with other people, but they told you when you were going in what you were going to be reading. And even if they didn't, like, I'm not saying you didn't have to read it to the very end. I think people forget you can also, like you said, with a book, the best thing is if you don't like something, you just shut the fucking book and walk away. Like, you don't have to force yourself to enjoy, like, you don't have to endure it. And therefore, like you said, if you can't get through that, don't try it in real life is probably the best way to kind of go with it. But it's a story, it's not an instruction manual, and it is not something, you know, it's not gospel. It's not telling you what you can and can't do with your life.
I agree.
Like, it's entertainment, goodly written entertainment.
And that's all it should be, is entertainment. And just like, and that's the thing too, like not everyone is into love stories and these happy endings and these very fairy tale things. Like, that's why we have genres of horror and sad movies, dramas, these heart-wrenching movies. And most of the time they're the ones up there getting the awards, like Oscars or Emmys or whatever the case may be. So it just goes to show that I do find that with darker writing and things like that, there's a lot more emotional depth to it than the positive sex scenes. So like, or positive, like the happier sex scenes where everyone's okay and hey, it's cool. But these like ones where there's someone involving like pain and things like that, that's a deep emotion that people can connect with.
Yes.
So that's why I like writing, because it definitely does take it to a whole other level, and people connect it personally too. Like what you said, they put themselves in it. So they connect whatever their pains are, whatever their happiness, whatever the joy is. But yeah, when you just watch it on TV, you're just being spoon-fed something.
Yeah.
So on the note of entertainment, I think that's what people need to remember, is that sexual writing is just a form of entertainment, and it's not meant to like offend people. These are just an outlet for people to get their thoughts and feelings out on paper. And I think, just stick to it. If you don't like it, just move on. But realize that this is an emotional and mental balance for someone. Like this is, or enjoy. Like it doesn't even have to be mental or emotional. Just like what you said, people just get off on what they get off. We don't have to look into it like it's over analyzing. I don't think we should be over analyzing things on the level that we do. Sometimes we take it too far.
No, I agree. That could definitely be a topic for another episode. But no, I completely agree with you. I think it's entertainment value. Like, you don't go into a movie and enjoy it and then have to go to get told you need to go to therapy for enjoying that. So you can enjoy sexual writing no matter how dark it is and no matter how light it is.
Exactly. Well, it was such a great session with you today. Great podcast. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Katrina, and we are excited for next week.
Yes, I cannot wait. I will see you next week, and thank you again for having me so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, that's it for us. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and let us know what you think. You can find me at thepartition.life and Katrina at _satisfiedcat. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time. And as always, stay kinky.